Hello, and thank you for joining me today. Again, my name is Stephanie. In the last video, we discussed the general information from Part B of IDEA. Now we'll start talking about the allocation of funds. Understand that my main goal here is to provide information on the rights of children with disabilities and their parents regarding the provision of FAPE, or free appropriate public education. For that reason, there's a lot of specific information about financial provisions included that I'm not going to be talking about, but know that the law does contain information regarding the use of funds by schools, as well as the cost of attorney fees and due processes if you need it. So with that in mind, let's get started. First, I want to talk about the way funds are allocated that directly benefit students. The law states that funds may be used to support direct services, including technical assistance and personnel preparation. They may also be used to provide positive behavioral interventions and supports, as well as mental health services. We know that behaviors and mental health concerns commonly go hand in hand with disabilities, so it's great that the law recognizes that and is working to support our students' needs in a holistic fashion. Funds can also be used for alternative programming for children with disabilities who have been expelled from school, as well as services for children in correctional institutions, state operated or supported schools, and charter schools. So it's really an all encompassing law in the way that it distributes funding. You may remember taking standardized tests when you were in school. For me, it was called CSAP. There's many others out there. IDEA supports the provision of accommodations for children with disabilities to successfully participate in these kinds of state and district-wide assessments, as well as just the day-to-day class tests. For students who cannot successfully participate with accommodations, it provides funds for the development and the provision of alternate assessments that are reliable and valid. On another note, the IDEA funds can be used to improve the use of technologies in the classroom by children with disabilities in order to enhance learning. The law goes on to specify that this includes the use of technology with universal design principles and assistive technology devices to maximize accessibility of the general education curriculum for these children. Remember, the goal is to support children with disabilities in doing what non-disabled peers do as much as possible. So any ways we can integrate them into general education is best. In the Part A video, we introduced the concept of transition programs. So not only does IDEA require that schools provide transition services, but it also provides the funding to back that up. Funding can be used for development and implementation of such programs, to include coordination of services within the agencies involved in supporting the transition to post-secondary activities. If you remember, transition services include community-based trainings and real-life experiences so that children may learn and practice necessary skills in context to help ensure their success. Now we'll talk about how funds can be used to support professionals and the agencies involved in provisions of services to children with disabilities. First, Part B states that funds can be used for personnel preparation and professional development and training. It goes on to specify that professional development for special and general education teachers should be based on scientifically based research to improve educational instruction in order to improve academic achievement based on challenging academic standards. This really holds teachers accountable for staying up to date and implementing strategies that are known to be effective. This is really important because demands change over time, and the way we teach and the way we learn changes over time. So we need to make sure we're adapting the ways that we support children with disabilities to continue meeting those demands as they change. When I was growing up in elementary and high school even, we weren't that technology based then. Yeah, we were typing our papers at home and we were maybe logging in to learn a couple of things on the computer and do research, but we didn't have personal computers in schools. And now that is very common. A lot of students do their work both in class and at home off Chromebooks, which obviously is a much different learning curve than the way you and I may have learned. To continue, Schools have been experiencing staff shortages for a long time, and even more so since the COVID-19 pandemic began. IDEA funds can be used to help meet personnel shortages, though again, the law doesn't really specify what that looks like. Furthermore, funding supports paperwork reduction activities, including expanding the use of technology in the IEP process. This helps to ensure that professionals are more efficient with their time and have more time to spend with their students rather than sitting down filling out all of this paperwork. Using technology in the IEP process may also help improve parent participation. I don't know about you, but personally, I would much rather have digital copies of paperwork to print when I want or to access wherever I am. And using virtual platforms could help parents participate more in the IEP meetings and things like that, as they can join from a variety of places rather than taking off and making the drive into school. Lawmakers clearly understood that needs were rising for IDEA, um, as the law includes provisions that support capacity building activities and improvement of service delivery by local educational agencies. Anytime you hear that term, what they're really talking about is schools. So looking at capacity building in the schools and improving service delivery in the schools. Finally, Part B lists technical assistance to schools and local educational agencies as an activity that may be directly funded. Now we'll move on to early intervention program. So Part B states that funds can be used to develop and implement a state policy jointly with the lead agency under subchapter 3, which is the same thing as Part C, and the state educational agency to provide early intervention services. Early intervention services must include an educational component that promotes school readiness and incorporates pre-literacy, language, and numeracy skills. Um, and this applies to children with disabilities who are eligible for services, those who previously received services, until they either enter or are eligible under state law to enter kindergarten or elementary school. Early intervention typically refers to that 0 to 3-year-old range because at that point, parents have the option to send their kids to preschool, at which point they'll have to have an IEP in place. However, parents may also make the choice to keep their child at home and continue receiving services under the early intervention program until kindergarten, in which case they will have an IFSP in place. And we'll talk about those a little bit more later. That IEP is an individualized education plan, again, used in the school setting. IFSP is individualized family service plan. So that is serving the child and their family's needs at home. Those evaluations are how eligibility for funding services are determined. So that's all part of the process. And again, we're going to get more in depth with that in the Part C video. So a few disclaimers that are included under the allocation of funds section of the law. In regards to funds distribution, it states that nothing in subchapter 2 or Part B shall be construed to limit or condition the right of a child with a disability who is assisted under the subchapter to receive a free and appropriate public education in the least restricted environment, or to authorize a state educational agency or local educational agency to establish a limit on what may be spent on the education of a child with disability. So this right here is something that really protects your child. Funding is not an excuse not to provide a free and appropriate public education. So if you are going to IEP meetings and you're hearing, oh, we can't do that, or oh, we don't have that, lack of funding or shortage of money cannot be the reason that they're not giving that to your child. If that is what they need to meet their individualized educational needs, then they have to provide that. So we've now covered all of the information regarding allocation of funds. We'll continue working through Part B in the next video. Thank you for joining me.